These are my top 10 favorite medium weight board games, as of now. In the most simple terms, a medium weight board game has a rule set and or strategic complexity that falls in between a lighter game and a heavier, more complex game. To me, a medium weight game bridges the gap between gamers that have different preferences for their experiences in a board game. Oftentimes, in general, gamers who prefer lighter experiences appreciate a quicker and perhaps more social experience, while heavier gamers prefer a more strategic and longer experience. Medium weight games tend to blend a quicker experience with a rule set that offers interesting decisions to make, and to me, that's what makes a great medium weight game. So, this list not only reflects some of my favorite games in this category in general, but the ones I thought would make that bridge between light and heavy the best. As with my previous list of my top 10 favorite lightweight games, I had to come up with a complexity range as described on Board Game Geek to know which games to include on this list. After reviewing the games I wanted to bring to this list, I narrowed it down to the games with a weight or complexity rating as low as 2.4, which was the upper limit for my lightweight games, and I went as high as 3.1. I chose this because while technically games up to 3.5 are categorized as medium heavy, which I think skews more towards the heavy side anyway, I felt that some of the games above 3.1 didn't quite fit that idea of bridging a game between light and heavy experiences, and once again skewed more towards that heavier type of experience. For example, right above 3.1 are games like Emberleaf 3.11, Rise and Fall 3.13, and many others, which may be medium weight games, but the experience feels closer to a heavyweight game. And so, because of the rule set, or maybe for how long it takes to play some of these games, those reasons for me tend to be on the heavier side. So, of course, this is all subjective, but that is what I'm sticking to. And then finally, before I start, if I included some of my favorite Uwe Rosenberg games, my favorite designer, it would take up a significant portion of this list. So I'm just going to preface this list by saying I won't include Rosenberg games, but if I did, they would include excellent titles such as Adiwa, which comes in at a weight of 2.77, Newsfjord 2.85, and the big box version at 3. Glass Road 2.96, Canal 2.9, and Caverna K vs. Cave at 2.68. If you look elsewhere on my channel, you'll probably find more information on what I think about these games. So with that, let's finally get into the list. Number 10 is Bruges. This weight comes in at 2.76. Bruges is one of my favorite medium weight Feld games, more so than Castles of Burgundy. The other day, I was at a game store and I saw Hamburg on sale and was really tempted to get it since it's the new edition of Bruges. And even though it's been a while since I've played Bruges, I still think fondly of what this game provides. In a quick experience, about an hour or so, you are interacting as merchants in the city of Bruges, doing classic Euro-style things and interacting with different portions of a game board, similar but not quite as minigame-esque as Trojan. But what I like most about this game is the deck of 100 plus individual cards, which dictate the actions you take and special powers you can invoke, creating interesting combos in each game. I think that this mechanism of taking different cards and doing what you can with them to achieve your goals is a hallmark feature of what I like in games in general, but especially in a midweight experience, because I think you can have a relatively straightforward rule set that is added upon with complexity based off of the cards and how they interact with each other. And I think Bruges was one of the first that accomplished this years ago. You can try this game for free on Yucata, and even though I've heard that the new Hamburg has sort of gotten a bad rap, I'm not exactly sure why. If you really like the gameplay, then the new edition of Hamburg might be the best way to currently own this system in physical form. Number 9 is Gingopolis at a rating or complexity of 2.91. This is another classic Euro game that is an abstracted tile-laying game of urban planning in a future where the ginkgo tree is used to build buildings. It is very much abstracted, but the tile laying works in a very synergistic way, where the three types of tiles, based off of color, dictate which new tiles you can get, how many you can get, the resources in which to build them, and then the points that are accumulated and generated for endgame victory. While fast playing, this game offers forward planning and a shared tile lane experience that can feel cutthroat at times, but offered in a way that I feel like you can try to plan for and become better at with predicting and executing what you and other players are trying to do. And you can get better at this with more plays. I'm glad that this was implemented on Board Game Arena in the last few years for more players to experience this classic game. Number 8 is The Game Makers at a rating of 2.9. This is perhaps the newest published game on this list, coming out later this year after it was crowdfunded last year. The game primarily hooks you by being a game about literal board game production, using covers and titles from actual board games and from all aspects of gaming too. So it's really cool to see the celebration of the hobby and all that it's been through. In addition, the gameplay is pretty good too. The action selection involves moving a worker forward on a rondel to acquire all the resources and bits that you need to make the board games, as well as determine how you will score throughout the game, allocating those resources towards those objectives. And so it does require some forward planning and decision making to maximize your abilities to score well. It may look intimidating to a newer casual gamer, but I feel the gameplay works pretty smoothly once you learn it. And so while mechanically it serves as a great introduction to rondel action selection, set collection, resource management, etc., it may also thematically introduce titles of games to new gamers to pique their interest in different ways and help them explore. I love how this game plays as well as what it represents, and once again, this is available on Board Game Arena to try. Number 7 is The Wolves, coming at a complexity of 2.82. This is quite an underrated game that I have enjoyed playing a lot and doesn't take a long time to play, but offers an interesting shared experience on the board that requires forethought and planning to play well. You take control of a pack of wolves, playing a game of area majority scoring while upgrading things like the number of wolves you have, where they can go, how much they can score based off of the majorities, and also placing down structures to increase your majority scoring as well. This is my preferred area majority game, and sure, it might feel a little samey after a few plays, but coming back to it every now and then is always a fun time. Number 6 is Union Stockyard at 2.47. This game was a recent surprise for me, and I was equally as surprised to see this only had a 2.47 for weight complexity on Board Game Geek. You play as meat packaging managers using worker placement to build out your factories, buy and sell meat, and acquire the rights to score the game in certain ways. It has the feel of a complex game, but the worker placement is quite straightforward, and the whole rule set is relatively easy to learn. Once again, perhaps a part of the reason it's midweight, it maybe doesn't have as much publicity, is the lack of variable content for the game, where you essentially get to see all the buildings and cards and things like that throughout a single game. It's essentially the order in which they come out that differs. But I think there's enough here strategically that it offers a pretty fun and unique experience from time to time, and I would love to play this more. Number 5 is Bus at a complexity of 3.05. This is, I think, the lightest of the main Splotter games and one of the more acquirable games from them, as it was picked up by Capstone Games here in the United States, for example. Bus is an older game from the 90s where worker placement is used to take people on a static map of a city. You take them from work to the pub and then back to home and vice versa, gaining points while you do so. The twist is you can stop time and prevent folks from moving from one location to another, possibly preventing someone else from gaining points. It's a cutthroat game in all the sense of a typical big box Splotter game, but delivered in an absolutely midweight rule set with interactive strategy that can be dissected over a multitude of games. I do like other Splotters better, but for this weight and complexity, I really like what this game offers. Number 4 is White Castle at a complexity of 3.06. This is now a quintessential medium weight game where you only take 9 turns to use dice worker placement to progress up tracks and gain points. I like this game a lot because it's so compact and short, and the key to winning this game is to make sure you find the actions that give you the most benefits through the most efficient ways possible, since you only have so few turns per game. It's a game that requires you to understand the board state well in order to find the best, most efficient turn possible, but it's manageable since the board is compact and there's limited but variable amount of pieces to the board to understand, and so the burden, I think, the mental burden to understand this game is manageable. I think this is an amazing game because you can express a lot of skill in finding the correct moves from this limited board presentation, and thus it's such a successful game in general. In my opinion, that's why it is, and I think it definitely deserves a place on this list. Number 3 is Earth, coming in at a rating of 2.91. This is one of the games I'm surprised is not a little higher on the all-time Board Game Geek list, but it's still pretty high for a good reason. This game features a large deck of cards and tableau building with icon collection, but offers simultaneous action selection with lots of positive interactive effects on cards played. There are some expansions to this game that make it either easier to find cards to play, to synergize well with your hand, or to give alternate routes of gaining points, among other things, which I'll discuss further in another video, but this game has always been one of my favorites, and I think it was the first game I ever kickstarted back in the day, so it holds a somewhat special place in my heart. It's on Board Game Arena to try with the first expansion, but because of the simultaneous play, it's recommended to play this in real time or on the table. But if you're a fan of games like Ark Nova, this might be a good one to try, and I will say that I've had a great time and I've had great success teaching players who enjoy lighter games to enjoy this one, so it fits really well on this list, I think. Number 2 is Lowlands. This comes in at a complexity of 3.07. Lowlands is an amazing game. It plays very much like a Rosenberg game. It's very much inspired by Rosenberg games, and it uses an action selection with workers with determined strengths to make actions more powerful, but it also features set collection, individualized tiles to build, sheep collection and breeding, and most of all, a shared incentive that feels almost semi-cooperative, where you build up a dike to prevent all of your sheep from being washed away by the tide by the end of the game. I think that this game lands in the medium weight because the building tiles themselves don't always have crazy actions you can take. They're very similar in weight to the tiles that you see in games like Last Road, but I feel like you do get to see a great proportion of these tiles, and so the variability and similarity from game to game kind of feels samey. But the experience nonetheless is amazing, and it's really fun to try to determine how much you should or would contribute to the dike and seeing what other players do, and that affects how the game is scored at the end. And so that social tension of interacting with that mechanism is really interesting, and that's why it's so high on this list as well. And finally, my number 1 game here it has to be Wingspan. It comes in at a complexity of 2.48 with the base game, but with expansions, it does rise to about 2.66 for example, Wingspan Asia. The more I think about it, the more it makes sense to me that Wingspan is my favorite medium weight game. It's probably the first true medium weight game that I've played in my hobby experience, and it's stuck around in my collection ever since it was released, and I've always been motivated to grab the expansions and everything that this game has to offer. The deck of individualized birds grows ever bigger with each expansion, and with the added complexity of those expansions is why this game falls in this category of medium weight, where it could be argued that the base game is on the lighter side. But this game is such a great bridge between light and heavy gaming, and I've seen it being proved time and time again in my own experiences. But I also see this game being played competitively at tournaments, all of that to say is that it's evidence to me that this game can be played at a very high competitive and strategic level, but can also be enjoyed very casually. And perhaps that's the great descriptor of what an excellent medium weight game is one that can be played competitively or casually and still be great. Sure, it does play a little long for what the rule set provides, but the more I play this game, the more I am sure that this is indeed a wonderful game and deserves the credit that it's given. And even though I like Wormspan and other games that are designed with this similar, mechanism and approach to gaming, the aesthetics and rule set of this game keeps calling me back to it. I really enjoy the bird theme, and so I don't mind coming back to this game. It's always a very comforting game to play, and for those reasons, I think this is the number one game on my list for medium weight. Let me know what you think about this list, if you've played these games or if you haven't, or what games you would include on your top 10 medium weight list. I'd love to know. Thank you again for listening or watching this video, and hope you have a great day, and see you in the next one.